Beyond the redactions, the 10 most disturbing revelations from the Epstein files. Introduction. Between December 2025 and January 2026, the United States Department of Justice released over 3 million pages of documents, 180,000 images, and 2,000 videos related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, the most extensive disclosure in a case that has haunted American institutions for nearly 2 decades. These files, released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act signed by President Donald Trump in November 2025, represent only half of the 6 million pages identified by federal prosecutors, with significant portions heavily redacted or withheld entirely. What emerges from this mountain of evidence is not merely the story of one predator, but a systemic failure spanning law enforcement, financial institutions, academic circles, and the highest echelons of society. The documents reveal a trafficking operation that exploited institutional trust, financial power, and social prestige to ensnare dozens of underage girls, some as young as 14, in a pyramid scheme of abuse that operated in plain sight for decades. This investigative report examines the 10 most disturbing findings from the Epstein files, based on grand jury testimony, FBI records, victim statements, financial documents, and correspondence that paint a comprehensive picture of how Epstein's criminal enterprise functioned, who enabled it, and why it persisted for so long despite multiple warnings. 1. The high school recruitment pyramid. Teenagers trafficking. Teenagers, perhaps no revelation is more chilling than the testimony that emerged from 2007 grand jury proceedings in West Palm Beach, Florida, which detailed how Epstein transformed victims into recruiters, building a self-perpetuating machine of exploitation that targeted high school campuses. A 21-year-old woman testified that she was recruited at age 16 by 2 acquaintances she met at a beach resort. They made her a proposition: work for this guy Epstein in Palm Beach, giving massages that would involve take-off articles of clothing and touching and fondling. When she arrived at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion, Ghislaine Maxwell greeted her and escorted her to a massage room. After the woman refused Epstein's advances, he offered her a different role: recruit other girls for $200 each. I was naked, and he tried fondling me, and I wouldn't have it. So after the massage, he gave me another proposition to bring girls to the house, and for every girl that I brought, I would make $200, she testified. She never gave Epstein another massage but became a prolific recruiter, bringing 7 to 10 girls from her high school to his mansion. The economics of exploitation were brutally simple. As the woman explained, the more you did is the more you make. Basically, the more clothes that come off, the more you let him touch you, the more you just let him have his way with you is the more that you would make. Otherwise, you would be demoted down to bringing girls over and just making money that way. Nearly every girl she brought was between 16 and 18 years old, except for one who was just 14. When she brought a 23-year-old woman, she was told the woman was too old and asked not to bring her back. Girls heard about the opportunity and approached her directly at school, asking to be included. They had no problem with it, she testified. Maxwell coordinated the operation, scheduling appointments and managing the pipeline of victims. When Maxwell was unavailable, the recruiter herself would set things up for the massages. Epstein paid her personally in 100 bills, always privately, never in front of others. FBI testimony from the same period confirmed this pattern repeated across multiple victims. An FBI special agent described how recruiters told prospective victims they could make $200 for a massage and warned them that Epstein may try to touch you, but if you are uncomfortable, just tell him no. Critically, girls were instructed to lie about their age. If Epstein asked her age, she was to say she was 18. This was not opportunistic predation. It was industrial-scale trafficking disguised as a job opportunity, targeting the most vulnerable, teenagers in need of money, many from lower-income families in Palm Beach County. The state investigation identified over 25 girls, with the majority under 18. One FBI agent testified that when asked by a 2007 grand juror whether Epstein coerced the girls, he struggled to answer. They were paid $200 to $400 to perform these massages, but yet if you ask if they were coerced, they were paid quite a bit of money for 30 to 45 minutes work. The framing was telling. The system had already begun to blame the victims. 2. Ghislaine Maxwell, architect of normalization. If Epstein was the financier of the operation, Ghislaine Maxwell was its HR department, the cultivator of trust, the normalizer of abuse, and the voice that convinced teenage girls that sexual exploitation was simply what grown-ups do. Maxwell's role extended far beyond logistics. FBI testimony from a 2019 federal grand jury in New York revealed how she operated as both recruiter and psychological manipulator, creating an environment where abuse felt inevitable, even desirable. According to the FBI agent's testimony, Maxwell positioned herself to victims as like a cool older sister and made comments like, "This is what grown-ups do." After Epstein sexually abused a 14-year-old girl during her first visit, Maxwell called the victim and said, in sum and substance, "Well, aren't you a clever girl?" Jeffrey was very impressed. This praise after abuse pattern was deliberate grooming. It reframed trauma as achievement, exploitation as sophistication. The message was clear. You've entered an adult world of wealth and privilege, and this is the price of admission. Maxwell's tactics evolved based on the victim's age and circumstances. The FBI agent described how one victim was flown around the world with Epstein for years. After she turned 18, Maxwell had shown her to a bedroom, and on the bed was a schoolgirl outfit. Maxwell told her, "Well, I thought it would be adorable if you gave Jeffrey his tea in this." The woman felt compelled to comply. So she felt like she had to put it on, so she put it on, took Epstein his tea, and Epstein then slapped her on the buttocks and reached under the skirt and touched her. When the FBI agent recounted the victim's demeanor during the interview, he said simply, "She was crying. She was very upset." A matching schoolgirl outfit was recovered from Epstein's New York mansion during the 2019 law enforcement search. Maxwell's presence during abuse sessions served multiple purposes. She waited just outside massage rooms in Epstein's residences in Palm Beach, New York, New Mexico, and London, close enough to signal control, distant enough to provide deniability. She coordinated travel schedules via phone tag, checking when victims would be in different cities to arrange Epstein's appointments. Convicted of sex trafficking in 2021 and currently serving 20 years in prison, Maxwell's depositions show her maintaining steadfast denial. In released testimony, she insisted that Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers, was a liar, offering no apology or acknowledgement of the pyramid of pain she helped construct. 3. The 1996 report that changed nothing. 23 years of institutional failure. One of the most devastating documents in the entire Epstein files release is a single handwritten page, an FBI complaint from September 1996, more than 2 decades before Epstein would face federal charges again, and 7 years before his first arrest. The complaint was filed by a woman described as a professional artist who reported that Jeffrey Epstein had stolen photographs she had taken of her 12 and 16-year-old sisters for her own artistic work. The accuser claimed Epstein is believed to have sold the pictures to potential buyers and was now threatening her. Epstein is now threatening the accuser that if she tells anyone about the photos, he will burn her house down. The FBI categorized the case as child pornography, and then, apparently, did nothing. The accuser's name is redacted in the DOJ files, but the details match precisely with the public account of Maria Farmer, who has stated for years that she reported Epstein to both the New York Police Department and the FBI in 1996. CBS News separately obtained a 1996 NYPD report in which Farmer said Epstein called her and stated he was going to burn victims' paintings and send her Polaroids, sick of the burnt paintings, categorized as aggravated harassment. Farmer's attorney, Jennifer Freeman, confirmed the FBI document appeared to be notes from her 1996 report. In a statement released through her legal team, Farmer said she felt redeemed by the document's disclosure, calling it one of the best days of my life, while also mourning for Virginia Giuffre and all the other survivors who were harmed because the FBI didn't do its job. "I'm crying for two reasons," Farmer said. "I want everyone to know that I am shedding tears of joy for myself, but also tears of sorrow for all the other victims that the FBI failed." The timeline is damning. Had the FBI acted on Farmer's 1996 complaint, Epstein's first known arrest in Palm Beach in 2005 might never have been necessary, because dozens of girls might never have been victimized in the intervening 9 years. Instead, Epstein continued unchecked, his wealth and connections apparently placing him beyond scrutiny. Maria Farmer is currently suing the federal government for failing to properly investigate her allegations, arguing that the FBI's inaction allowed Epstein to continue threatening her and abusing others for years. Jordan Merson, an attorney representing other Epstein survivors suing the government, stated bluntly, "The Maria Farmer complaint establishes that the FBI did not do what it was supposed to do to protect the many victims of Jeffrey Epstein." The 1996 report represents not just a missed opportunity, but a pattern of institutional protection that would repeat in 2008 and arguably continues in the heavily redacted files of 2025-2026. 4. The 2008 Sweetheart Deal. How Alexander Acosta shut down justice. By 2007, federal prosecutors in the Southern District of Florida had assembled what should have been an airtight case against Jeffrey Epstein. They had identified dozens of underage victims. They had testimony. They had evidence from a 2005 Palm Beach police raid that uncovered massage tables, sex toys, and phone messages referencing girls by date of birth. A 60-count draft federal indictment sat ready, prepared by the lead prosecutor, detailing sex trafficking charges that could have resulted in a life sentence. And then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta made it all disappear. On September 24, 2007, one day before the prosecutor in the case was prepared to file the indictment, Epstein signed a non-prosecution agreement, NPA, brokered by Acosta. The deal was extraordinary in its leniency and secrecy. Epstein would plead guilty to 2 state prostitution charges in Florida, serve just 13 months in county jail with work release privileges during the day, and register as a sex offender. In exchange, the federal investigation would end, and critically, Epstein's alleged co-conspirators, both named and unnamed, would receive blanket immunity from federal prosecution. The Miami Herald described an email from Epstein's attorney after a breakfast meeting with Acosta. "Thank you for the commitment you made to me during our October 12 meeting," Lefkowitz wrote in a letter to Acosta after their breakfast meeting in West Palm Beach. He added that he was hopeful that Acosta would abide by a promise to keep the deal confidential. "You assured me that your office would not contact any of the identified individuals, potential witnesses, or potential civil claimants and the respective counsel in this matter," Lefkowitz wrote. The deal violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act by failing to notify Epstein's victims, a fact a federal judge acknowledged in February 2019. But by then, the damage was done. The NPA essentially shut down an ongoing FBI probe into whether there were more victims and other powerful people who took part in Epstein's sex crimes, and sealed the indictment, preventing public scrutiny. A 2020 Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility (OPR) investigation found that Acosta exercised poor judgment, but cleared him of corruption or professional misconduct. Finding no evidence, his decision was based on corruption or other impermissible considerations, such as Epstein's wealth, status, or associations. The report also stated it found no evidence Epstein was a cooperating witness or an intelligence asset, directly refuting conspiracy theories that Epstein had leverage over prosecutors. Yet the OPR report itself called it troubling that Acosta decided to resolve the case through a negotiated plea before the investigation was even completed. While the FBI was still identifying new victims in other jurisdictions, and before any effort had been made to gain cooperation from Epstein's alleged co-conspirators. Acosta resigned as Trump's labor secretary in 2019 amid renewed scrutiny of the deal, defending it by saying his goal was straightforward and included putting Epstein behind bars. But attorneys for Epstein's victims called the OPR report offensive and a whitewash. Critically, Acosta was notably absent from the House Oversight Committee's 2025 subpoena list for the Epstein investigation, despite his central role. The 2008 deal accomplished what Epstein needed most: time and protection. For 11 years, he operated with only the constraint of sex offender registration, continuing to cultivate relationships with the elite. Relationships that the newly released files show included scientists, financiers, and tech billionaires. 5. Elon Musk and the island that wasn't, or was it? A pattern of proximity. Among the most controversial revelations in the January 2026 file release were emails and calendar entries showing that Elon Musk, now the world's richest person and a close advisor to President Trump, engaged in detailed planning with Jeffrey Epstein to visit his private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands between 2012 and 2014. Musk has consistently denied ever visiting Epstein's island and has sought to distance himself from the convicted sex offender. But the correspondence released by the DOJ tells a different story, or at least raises serious questions about how close Musk came to visiting the site where, according to federal prosecutors, many of Epstein's crimes occurred. The earliest documented contact between Musk and Epstein appears to be late September 2012, when Musk noted they had a very enjoyable conversation. Just 10 days later, Epstein invited Musk to his Caribbean island. "If you find some time, come visit me on my island in the Caribbean. Bring your friend or friends. I will be there most of Nov and Dec." Musk replied affirmatively. "Sounds good. We'll try to make it." Over the following weeks, the planning became increasingly specific. In October 2012, Musk told Epstein he and his then-wife Tallulah would be in the Caribbean at year's end, and assumed Epstein would be on his island. Epstein confirmed and offered transportation. "An easy but correct assumption. We will catch up either in NY, or I will send a heli to St. Bart for you, 45 minutes away." On November 2, 2012, Musk asked directly, "What's a good time to come over between Des 23 and 30? Epstein responded, "Probably after Xmas Day. Any day, let's choose a sunny one," adding, "Glad you are coming." Musk proposed firm dates. "Let's aim for Dec 28, 29, or 30. Looking forward to it." The pattern repeated in 2013. In November, Epstein again invited Musk to the Caribbean over Christmas, mentioning that Woody Allen would be with him. Musk replied, "Yes." In December, Musk messaged, "Christmas New Year will in the BVIST's area the holidays. Is there a good time to visit?" Epstein offered to send a helicopter. Musk asked, "When should we head to your island on the 2nd? Epstein replied that January 2nd or 3rd would be perfect, and said, "I will come and get you." A few days later, Epstein canceled, citing work obligations. Internal scheduling documents corroborate the planning. A calendar prepared by Epstein's assistant Leslie Groff for December 6, 2014, includes the reminder, "Elon Musk to Island Deck 6. Is this still happening?" Separate logs from January 2013 show Epstein informing an associate he was meeting Elon Musk for lunch. Beyond the island discussions, the emails show Musk and Epstein corresponded about solar energy, with Epstein inquiring about powering his New Mexico ranch with solar. They also attempted to arrange a February 2013 meeting at SpaceX's office near Los Angeles. The next day, Epstein thanked Musk for the tour and remarked, "You would have had fun at XMAS." Musk responded with a simple, "I see," and a smiling emoji. In December 2012, responding to an island invitation, Musk wrote to Epstein, "Do you have any parties planned? I've been working to the edge of sanity this year, and so, once my kids head home after Christmas, I really want to hit the party scene in St. Bart's or elsewhere and let loose." He continued, explaining that while he appreciated the invitation, "A peaceful island experience is the opposite of what I'm looking for." This statement, seeking parties rather than peace, raises questions about what Musk understood Epstein's island to offer. Whether Musk ultimately visited Epstein's island remains unclear. The emails show canceled plans, logistical complications, and ambiguous follow-ups. But what is clear is that for at least 2 years, Musk actively discussed and planned such visits, corresponded warmly with a man who had already been convicted in 2008 of soliciting prostitution from a minor and maintained contact that extended to touring SpaceX facilities together. The revelations about Musk come amid his rising political influence as a close advisor to President Trump and his role in government efficiency efforts. They add his name to a long list of powerful men whose proximity to Epstein, whatever the nature or extent, demands scrutiny and explanation. 6. JPMorgan Chase. The bank that looked the other way. Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise required infrastructure, planes, properties, shell companies, and critically banking services that could facilitate the movement of millions of dollars used to pay victims, recruiters, and co-conspirators. For 15 years, that infrastructure was provided by JPMorgan Chase, the largest bank in the United States, which maintained Epstein as a client from 1998 until 2013, 5 years after his 2008 conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor. Court documents and settlements reveal that JPMorgan not only ignored internal warnings about Epstein, but also allowed a senior executive, James Jess Staley, to develop what court filings described as a profound friendship with the convicted sex offender, even visiting his private island. Emails released as part of litigation showed that Staley and Epstein exchanged over 1,200 messages between 2008 and 2013, with content ranging from business discussions to references to Disney princesses, a phrase that took on sinister overtones given Epstein's pattern of abuse and the schoolgirl outfit recovered from his mansion. In one email, Staley wrote to Epstein about visiting his island, and Bloomberg reported that the communications detailed private island visits and the JPMorgan relationship. In June 2023, JPMorgan reached a $290 million settlement with a class of Epstein's victims who had accused the bank of being the financial conduit that enabled his sex trafficking operation, profiting from and facilitating his crimes. The settlement came after months of damaging revelations showing that JPMorgan disregarded internal alerts and missed warning signs about Epstein and maintained its relationship with him even after his arrest and guilty plea. JPMorgan did not admit wrongdoing in the settlement, but issued a statement acknowledging, "We all now understand that Epstein's behavior was monstrous, and we believe this settlement is in the best interest of all parties, especially the survivors, who suffered unimaginable abuse at the hands of this man." Just 3 months later, in September 2023, JPMorgan settled with the U.S. Virgin Islands for $75 million, of which $30 million would support local charities, $25 million would strengthen law enforcement around human trafficking, and $20 million would cover legal fees. The total was less than half the $190 million the territory had sought. JPMorgan also sued Jess Staley, alleging he aided in hiding Epstein's years-long sex abuse and trafficking to keep the financier as a client, and seeking to hold him personally liable for the bank's settlements, and to force him to pay back wages earned during the period he allegedly knew about the abuse. Staley left JPMorgan in 2013 to become CEO of the British bank Barclays, a position he resigned from in 2021 following a report by British regulators into his past links with Epstein. Staley has consistently denied knowing about Epstein's sex trafficking activities, expressing regret over the friendship but maintaining he had no knowledge of crimes. In June 2025, Staley lost a job ban tribunal case related to his Epstein ties. The JPMorgan settlements totaling $365 million represent the largest financial accountability imposed on an institution for enabling Epstein's operations. But as attorney Sigrid Macaulay, representing victims, noted, these settlements highlight the crucial role financial institutions have in identifying and preventing sex trafficking. The files reveal that banking compliance failures were not isolated mistakes, but sustained institutional blindness spanning 15 years, 5 administrations of bank leadership, and crossing the threshold of Epstein's criminal conviction, a conviction that should have triggered immediate account closure and suspicious activity reports. 7. The Virgin Islands settlement, tax fraud, environmental destruction, and a $105 million reckoning. While much attention has focused on Epstein's Manhattan mansion and Palm Beach estate, his most significant base of operations was arguably his private island compound in the U.S. Virgin Islands, a 70-acre property known as Little St. James, purchased in 1998 for nearly $8 million and infamously dubbed Pedophile Island after the nature of crimes committed there became public. In November 2022, the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands reached a landmark $105 million settlement with Epstein's estate, believed to be the largest monetary settlement in the history of the territory, resolving a law enforcement action filed in 2020 under the territory's anti-criminal enterprise, sex trafficking, child exploitation, and fraud laws. The settlement revealed the full scope of how Epstein weaponized his Virgin Islands presence for both operational and financial advantage. Under the agreement, Epstein's estate agreed to pay $105 million in cash plus half the proceeds from the sale of Little St. James, where Attorney General Denise George stated she had met with 3 alleged victims who were trafficked and sexually exploited. But the cash payout was only part of the story. The settlement also required the estate to return more than $80 million in economic development tax benefits that Virgin Islands officials said Epstein and his co-defendants fraudulently obtained to fuel his criminal enterprise. The government alleged that Southern Trust Company, an Epstein-controlled entity, made fraudulent misrepresentations to the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority about its qualifications for EDC tax benefits. Southern Trust claimed to operate a legitimate business employing Virgin Islands residents, when in reality, according to the complaint, its employees performed tasks related to any number of other Epstein-owned companies or properties, such as Little St. James, and 2 of them were not even residents of the U.S. Virgin Islands despite being reported as such. A 2012 transcript and public records showed Epstein had pitched a plan to collect population genetics data in the Virgin Islands as part of his application for these tax incentives, a proposal experts later described as half-baked and likely designed primarily to secure financial benefits, rather than advance actual science. The environmental component of the settlement added another disturbing dimension. The estate agreed to pay $450,000 to remediate damage around Great St. James, Epstein's second Virgin Islands property purchased in 2016 for $18 million. The government found that Epstein had razed the remains of centuries-old historical structures of enslaved workers to make room for his development, literally erasing the physical evidence of historical suffering to build his own compound. Under the settlement, both islands would be sold to independent third parties, terminating Epstein's ownership of property in the Virgin Islands and ensuring that the islands cannot be used for illicit purposes by those associated with Epstein. The estate also agreed to wind down all business operations in the territory and provide documents to assist ongoing investigations. Little St. James was initially listed for $125 million, but local real estate listings described it more modestly at $55 million, noting features including 3 beaches, a helipad, a gas station, and more than 70 acres of land that offer an array of subdivision possibilities, and a comprehensive, discreetly located infrastructure support system. The sanitized real estate language cannot obscure what FBI testimony, grand jury records, and victim statements confirm. This was the epicenter of Epstein's trafficking operation, where private planes, helicopters, and boats delivered underage girls to a remote location designed to evade detection by law enforcement or the public. The Virgin Islands settlement represents not just financial restitution, but a reckoning with how Epstein exploited jurisdictional complexity, tax incentives, and geographic isolation to build and sustain his criminal enterprise for over 2 decades. 8. The Baby Ranch. Epstein's eugenics fantasy and scientific legitimacy. Among the most disturbing findings in the Epstein files is not evidence of crimes already prosecuted, but rather a window into Epstein's ideological motivations and long-term ambitions, a vision he discussed openly with elite scientists and businessmen starting in the early 2000s. According to a 2019 New York Times investigation corroborated by multiple sources and now included in DOJ files, Epstein confided to scientists and others his hope to seed the human race with his DNA by impregnating women at his vast New Mexico ranch, a 10,000-acre property known as Zorro Ranch that he purchased in 1993 for an estimated $12 million. The plan was not vague or hypothetical. Jaron Lanier, a virtual reality pioneer and author, said he spoke to a scientist at a dinner at Epstein's Manhattan mansion, who told him that Epstein's goal was to have 20 women at a time impregnated at his 33,000-square-foot Zorro Ranch in a tiny town outside Santa Fe. Lanier said the scientist identified herself as working at NASA, but he did not remember her name. According to Lanier, the NASA scientist said Epstein had based his idea on the Repository for Germinal Choice, a controversial sperm bank established to be stocked with the sperm of Nobel laureates to strengthen the human gene pool. Only one Nobel laureate, physicist William Shockley, acknowledged contributing sperm. The repository discontinued operations in 1999. Two award-winning scientists and a financial advisor to large companies confirmed to the Times that Epstein told them about the scheme. One at a 2001 dinner at his Manhattan townhouse, another at a 2006 conference Epstein hosted in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, and the third at a gathering at his mansion. Alan Dershowitz, professor emeritus of law at Harvard, recalled Epstein steering a Cambridge lunch conversation toward the question of how humans could be improved genetically, which Dershowitz said appalled him, given the Nazis' use of eugenics to justify their genocidal effort to purify the Aryan race. Epstein's vision reflected what has become known as transhumanism, the use of technologies like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence to improve the human population. Critics, including scientists who interacted with Epstein, have characterized transhumanism as a modern-day version of eugenics, the discredited field of improving the human race through controlled breeding. Epstein didn't just talk about these ideas, he funded them. In 2011, a charity he established gave $20,000 to the Worldwide Transhumanist Association, now Humanity Plus, whose website states its goal is to deeply influence a new generation of thinkers who dare to envision humanity's next steps. Southern Trust Corporations, Epstein's Virgin Islands business, disclosed in a local filing that it was engaged in DNA analysis. The scientists Epstein cultivated formed a who's who of elite academia. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Murray Gell-Mann, who discovered the quark, theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould, neurologist Oliver Sacks, molecular engineer George M. Church, who has worked to identify genes that could be altered to create superior humans, and MIT physicist Frank Wilczek, also a Nobel laureate. Harvard cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker said he was invited by colleagues, including Harvard professor Martin Nowak and theoretical physicist Lawrence Krauss, to salons and coffee klatches where Epstein would hold court. While some peers hailed Epstein as brilliant, Pinker described him as an intellectual imposter who would abruptly change the subject, ADD style, dismiss an observation with an adolescent wisecrack. After Pinker rebutted one of Epstein's arguments at dinner, citing research showing high infant mortality causes people to have more children, Epstein seemed annoyed, and a Harvard colleague later told Pinker that he had been voted off the island and was no longer welcome at Epstein's gatherings. Epstein's interest in perpetuating his own genetics extended to cryonics. One transhumanism adherent said Epstein discussed his desire to have his head and penis frozen to be brought back to life in the future. After Epstein's 2019 arrest, George Church, the Harvard-MIT geneticist, issued a public apology for his poor awareness and judgment in accepting research funds from Epstein and meeting with him frequently, admitting he knew nothing about Epstein's crimes. MIT Media Lab director Joy Ito resigned in September 2019 after revelations about the extent of Epstein's donations and involvement with the lab. There is no evidence Epstein's baby ranch scheme ever came to fruition. A 2015 court filing indicated a victim had been abused at the New Mexico property, and New Mexico lawmakers proposed a probe of activity at the ranch in 2025, but criminal charges specific to Zorro Ranch have not been filed. What the eugenics obsession reveals is that Epstein's crimes were not merely about sexual gratification, but about power, legacy, and a deeply narcissistic belief in his own genetic superiority. A belief he sought to institutionalize through relations,